They say those who don't study the past are doomed to repeat it, but Scott Frost is no fool.
You are Locked On UCF, your daily podcast on the UCF Knights, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome on in to Locked On UCF, your daily UCF podcast. I'm your host, Mike G, and thank you so much for making us your first listen of every single day. Guys, we are talking Scott Frost's comment on the eve of fall camp. He spoke to the media. We are covering every single comment over a series of shows this week. So on today's show, we're going to talk about a question he was asked about looking back at 2016. He gave an injury update on some players, and then he was asked a question about what success looks like in year one, and we're going to talk about that as well. Let's start at the top as always. Looking back at 2016, Scott Frost was asked this question. Let's listen to what he had to say, and then we'll comment.
Coach, you've talked about progress. How much does your 2016 season sort of influence or inspire what you're looking to do in the year one of this stint in terms of that?
Yeah, I think one of the things I've always said privately to my coaching staff is you always have to show progress. And if you're not progressing, then you can get stuck and even go backwards. So I think we need to move it in the right direction. Year one in 2016, we went from 0 wins to 6, and that was a big step. We're not starting at 0 here. We're starting with a team that won 4 last year, and watching tape, definitely should have won more than that. So I don't think we have as big a gap to close as we did back then. But it's also tougher to close that gap against teams like we're playing in the Big 12. So you definitely want to show progress. Like I said, I don't know the opponents very well. I haven't coached in this league, played in this league a long time ago, but haven't coached in it. So it's going to be fun to get out there, and we really won't know how we compare against those teams until we get on the field with them.
Scott Frost acknowledging that there's not as big a gap to close as 2016, but also saying, hey, look, we're going against much tougher competition this go round, so it's going to be harder to close it. I think both of those things are very true statements there by Scott Frost. Good on him for acknowledging the toughness of the league. The Big 12 is as competitive as a conference as any of the Power Four right now. The conference is wide open. There are a lot of teams that have a shot to win the conference, but Scott Frost said during this press conference that he feels like his team has a chance to maybe surprise some people. Guys, that's about coaching. That is about high-level development. It's about coaching, and Scott Frost believes they can do that. So it starts with his staff. It starts with his staff. He's hired a great staff. He's hired a staff that's familiar with his expectations and one that can execute his vision for this football team. Top to bottom, alignment is important if you're going to have a winning program. It's stuff that is hard to quantify on a scoreboard or on a stat sheet, but when it's clicking on all cylinders, you can win a lot of football games. Scott Frost is the guy to make that happen, I think, in Orlando the second go around. So, when you're asked this question about what about before, what carries over from what you did before, because believe this, you've got to adapt if you're Scott Frost. The game, there are some things, football is football, and there's some things that carry over, but also the game is not the same as it was in 2016. And it is important that Scott Frost remembers that and adapts. You cannot do all the things you did before. I think that he realizes that, and I think it's going to pay dividends for UCF here in the first year. Year one is about establishing a culture. It's about establishing a mindset for your team. And Scott Frost has got to do that. He's got to lay that foundation in year one. Part of, these press conferences are the routine stuff, updating on player injuries, things of that nature, guys. We'll talk about what he had to say about certain players and their spring and summer injuries right after a quick word from our sponsors. This episode of Locked On UCF is brought to you by our friends at Drip Drop. If you're trying to stay on top of your routine, whether it's workouts, long days on campus, or staying focused through back-to-back classes, hydration is where it all starts. And that's where Drip Drop comes in. When I'm on top of my hydration game, everything is better. My energy, my mood, my focus, even my skin. But getting enough fluids isn't always easy. That's why I've been loving Drip Drop, especially in this southern humidity, guys. Woo, oh, my goodness. Always thirsty. Right now, Drip Drop is offering Locked On listeners 20% off your first order. Just head to dripdrop.com and use code LOCKEDONCollege. That's dripdrop.com, promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Get in the game with Drip Drop. Injury updates, standard stuff. Scott Frost gave us a quick update on some player injuries. Let's listen to what he had to say.
You had a handful of players that were in non-contact jerseys through the entire spring. John Walker, Malachi Lawrence, Braden Marshall. Are those guys all cleared for full participation starting tomorrow?
Yes. We have one tight end, Peening, that had a little bit of a hamstring issue. He's done a great job so far, so he'll probably miss a week or so. I think everybody else is up and ready to go. I'm actually anxious to see it because it wasn't just some players. It was some of our best players. You talk about Malachi and John Walker and Braden Marshall and a few other guys that are going to be key components of our team that I haven't even really seen them operate yet. So I was pleased with our team coming off spring, but adding guys like that and a few others is healthy and going into camp should be a big boost for us.
Scott Frost updating on player injuries there. Look, UCF has got to be a healthy football team in the fall if they're going to achieve some of the things that he wants to do in year one. So we appreciate the player update there. He was also asked a question about QB. Now, he was asked a couple questions about QB, but there's one question that I want to come back to. We're going to listen to what Scott Frost had to say, and then we'll be right back.
You've talked about the gains made during spring. Where did you leave spring in terms of the quarterback position? Where were guys then, and what are you expecting to see here in the first week of practice?
Yeah, there's a saying in football, if you have multiple quarterbacks and you don't have one. And I think sometimes that's true. I don't feel that way about this team. We've got three guys that did well enough in spring that I feel like if they were our starter, I'd feel really good about it. We'd probably design the offense a little different based on who that quarterback was. But all three of them are capable of making us a dangerous team. The sooner it clarifies, the better off we'll be because we'll be able to get some reps with that guy, more reps with that guy, start to develop continuity. But we're also not going to anoint anyone. I had a meeting with the three the other day, and we're going to grade every single snap, every single play. And I told them mostly it's going to be based on did you make the winning play on that play. Sometimes that might be a 50-yard completion. Sometimes it might be taking a sack or throwing the ball away. Sometimes it might just be handing the ball off. But I really am going to lean on the guy that puts us in the best position to win by making the right decision in every play. And we're going to give all three guys an opportunity, and hopefully that clears itself up pretty quick.
How quickly do you want to make a decision?
I would love to make a decision 2 weeks ago, but to be fair to those guys, we're not ready to because they've all done good things, all three of them. Got to mention Dobby too. He came in and is doing a really good job. So I feel good about the level of talent. But like I said, we're not going to anoint anyone. So it's up to those guys to determine it. And usually through the course of camp, it isn't just us that knows. They know, and the whole team knows. And if we get to a point, we get to game one and it's not clear, then the competition will probably continue. But I think we're better as a team if somebody steps up and takes it.
We are better as a team if somebody steps up and takes it. I said a lot there, talking about if you have three quarterbacks, you don't have one. And look, they're not going to anoint anybody here. Scott Frost wants the job to be won. But he also, in this press conference, left open the possibility they could go into week one still kind of evaluating who's going to be the guy for the rest of the season. I think that that's smart. I think in year one, you've got to get it right. You've got to figure out which guy you can develop, which guy can take you into next year and set your program up for years to come. So one of the key things Scott Frost is looking for is decision making. Which quarterback gets us into the right plays? Which quarterback consistently protects the football, sees the field, executes the coach's vision on offense? Scott Frost and McKenzie and Milton know how they want this thing to look. If you're going to be the QB at the helm of this offense, you've got to understand, see things through their eyes, and be that coach on the field that they're looking for. It's going to be exciting, I think, to watch this QB race kind of unfold here. McKenzie Milton was the most popular hire of all the hires that Scott Frost made, bringing the hometown hero back to Orlando to coach QBs was a smart move by Scott Frost and company. So, QB is going to get way too much of the blame and way too much of the praise at the same time. Last year, the struggles were well noted. Nobody could get it together. They spent a ton of money in the portal on KJ Jefferson. He didn't pan out. All right, Jacurri Brown at times could not hit the broadside of a barn. EJ Colson wasn't ready. Dylan Risk, I thought, stepped in admirably for a guy who was suddenly elevated from fourth string to starting QB. But let's be honest, that was kind of a last-ditch effort by Gus to find something that could work down the stretch. If you're Scott Frost, you can't have that circus this year. You can't be on your third QB by midseason. That's definitely not going to work here. You've got to show competency in picking, evaluating, and developing quarterbacks. Today's college football is a quarterback's game. The teams with dynamic quarterback play win most of the time. Almost 99% of the time. You have to. I know that might sound like an overly simplistic statement, but in the early 2010s, you could play 3 yards in a cloud of dust football and win championships. Around the time that Lane Kiffin went to Alabama, there was a shift happening in college football. Nick Saban recognized it, and he brought somebody in who could run the type of offenses that he feared. And then he became the thing that he feared on offense. And they had an incredible run at quarterback. If you're Scott Frost, if you can be as adept at finding high-level QBs, developing them, and getting them to produce, they're going to build a statue of Scott Frost outside of the bounce house. So it'll be fun to watch to see where they go with that. But that wasn't the only thing they talked about here. I want to close the show today talking about what success looks like. He was asked a question that I love about what does success look like. We're going to talk about that next on Locked On UCF. What does success look like? Scott Frost was asked this question. I love it. We're going to listen to it, and we're going to talk about it.
Coach, I know you got a long way to go, camp and whatnot, but what does success look like in year one for you at UCF, or second stint year one?
Yeah, success is progress. Sometimes it happens slower than you want. Sometimes it happens faster than you want. Last time I was here, it happened a lot faster than I think even we expected. But we have a saying around here that is still up on the walls when I got back from the first time, rise and conquer. And to the kids, that means rise up every day, try to be the best you can be that day and conquer the challenges in front of you, and then go to bed and try to wake up and be even better than that the next day. So it's got to be daily progress for us. We've made up a lot of ground, but still have a ways to go, and we need to continue to rise and conquer every day.
Rise and conquer. It's very simple. You've got to win every single moment. You got to be ready for your moment when it comes. You've got to win practice. You got to win the small battles every single day. You got to get out of bed. You got to go to class. You got to be on time for class. You got to give your all in workouts. You have to study your playbook. Rise and conquer is about details. It's about meticulousness. It's about a dedication to excellence that UCF players have to have if they want to win in the Big 12. This is also a question about the culture that Scott Frost is trying to establish the second go around. What kind of culture is UCF going to have? Is it going to be a culture that produces leaders? Is it going to be a culture that produces the type of young men that when we see their off the field accolades, we're proud of that? Is this going to be a program that leads the Big 12, not just in winning football games, but winning at life? That's what you need from Scott Frost. Like it or not, he's a role model. He's a guy that young men should aspire to model themselves after. As a football player, maybe as a coach one day, as a businessman, as a husband, as a father. Scott Frost has got to establish a culture that produces leaders. He also has to establish a culture that produces monsters because this is the Big 12. This isn't what you had in 2016, 2017. This is something completely different. I mentioned on previous shows, the Big 12 is as competitive as any conference right now. It's wide open. Ton of teams that could take this conference right now. And when you look at UCF's schedule, a lot of those teams are on the schedule. Kansas State, Texas Tech, BYU. These are the teams you've got to take down if you want to get to the top of the Big 12 mountain. And maybe you do what Arizona State did. Nobody saw Arizona State coming last year. Nobody. If they are telling you they are lying because they picked Arizona State to finish dead last in the Big 12 and they won the whole damn thing. They almost took down Texas in the college football playoff. That was no fluke. Cam Scatterboot was a man last year. If you're UCF, you can't waste if there's an RJ Harvey on this team, you can't waste them like they did last year. 6.8 yards per carry. And still underutilized. No way that's happening under Scott Frost. The culture of this team has to be winning. But not just winning football games. It's about winning day to day. It's about winning the small things. I've spent time around a lot of athletes and, a couple of major college football programs. What winning championships look like day to day in an athletic department, in a football facility. That's a lot of stuff that nobody sees. If you're Scott Frost, you have to produce champions, period. Guys, that's it for another great edition of Locked On UCF, your daily UCF podcast. Thank you so much for making us your first listen of every day. For your next listen, go check out our friends at The Portal. Our guy Brian Smith has the latest in portal rumors, signings, all the going-ons in college football. You can find The Portal on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. You can find us here tomorrow on Locked On UCF.